Okay, this is it. The very last terrible sequel I have to do. Hopefully. Oh god, I hope Disney have learnt their lesson. I say terrible, because it is, but given that the first sequel was so horrifically awful and that a second sequel wasn't justified in any way, it's not as bad as it could have been. Cinderella is about as blandly nice as she ever was, but she does have a fair few notable moments. Right off the bat, she admits she wouldn't have achieved anything on her own.
Of course, it helped that she had mouse friends who could sew and a fairy godmother who could do wonders with pumpkins.
She finally realises that she doesn't have to be dependent on magic, and when magic itself takes her happy ending away from her, she figures out the logic of the situation.
If I just see him again...
Yeah, see Princey!
Yes, everything will be alright!
And actually gets off her arse and does something about it. Not only that, but she uses her ingenuity and charm to go about it. This is definitely a vast improvement on the original, especially when she gets all badass, fights her way out of a mutant pumpkin, and rides like hell to save her wedding. But she's still all too eager to invest her entire future happiness in one dance, considers marriage without a relationship or even a real proposal, and doesn't stop to think that maybe this is a lucky escape? That it might be her desperation to get away from her cruel stepmother that's the driving force behind her decisions, rather than her love for Prince whatever his name is. By the way, when he actually does get round to proposing, he gets her name wrong.
Will you marry me, Cinderella?
Which is completely unintentionally hilarious. But thanks to damn Disney magic, I still root for her. Although not half as much as I root for her stepsister. Anastasia goes through a hell of a lot more than Cinderella in this film, and works a hell of a lot harder too. Her emotional arc runs the gamut. Jealousy towards Cinderella and her wonderful life, stunned guilt at her own callousness, excitement at the prospect of a new life, anxiety for potentially failing at that new life, embarrassment at not being the graceful woman that everyone was expecting, happiness at being accepted as graceless, a false sense of being in love, followed by the crashing realisation that she isn't, hope that she could find love with the prince, guilt for taking Cinderella's happiness away, and finally acceptance of who she is and what may happen to her. It's a good story arc. I guess that baker dude from the second one didn't work out then. Shame. Except he's in the credits of the third one, so... what the fuck? Well, that continuity error aside, I don't really mind Cinderella 3. It seeks to rectify some mistakes from the first two films, give the story some bite, as well as address some of the weaker aspects of the original film. But I feel it's a little late in the game to be making fun of the nonsensical aspects of Disney fairy tales.
How does she know that you love her? How do you show her you love her?
Don't get me wrong, I love Enchanted. But like I say, I feel 2007 is a bit too late for Disney to be poking fun at this stuff. It would have made more sense 10 years prior, during the Renaissance, but let's face it, that would have been shit. Disney's comedy stylings in the 90s were not a patch on how it is now, especially when it came to laughing at itself. That just wouldn't have happened back then without an undercurrent of smug superiority, knowing they pretty much ran the world at that point. But since Pixar and DreamWorks came along, they've had to become more humble. And I suppose a movie like Enchanted was an inevitability. You might call it a bit of a cheat to include Giselle, being both a parody and not animated, but she's actually a pretty good yardstick to measure how far the Disney princesses have come. All the things she does, like singing to herself about the man of her dreams, agreeing to marry the man she just met purely because he rescued her, falling for an obvious evil trick. We laugh at them now because, as an audience, we've become more savvy to Disney conventions. But then, so did Disney, really quite a long time ago. Think about it, when was the last time we saw a Disney girl this helpless and naive? The last official princess was Mulan, who was certainly neither helpless nor naive. And as much as I have my problems with them, I concede that Belle and Ariel were written much more interestingly than this. Maybe Jasmine wasn't, but she wasn't the main focus of Aladdin. So I suppose the last princess to really be this way, unironically, was Aurora in Sleeping Beauty in 1959. Yes, 2007 was far, far too late. Giselle herself, despite being a parody, is actually very enjoyable. She should be irritating as hell, but her good intentions see her through the first half of the film, and her transformation into, literally, a three-dimensional character gets her to the end. Watching the two worlds mesh is the fun of the film, in particular Giselle adapting to it, such as going from not knowing what anger is to getting angry at someone and then getting excited because she finally experienced an emotion beyond naive hope, and going from almost compulsively singing songs at random moments to not realising when she's meant to join in with the duet.
You're not singing.
Oh.
She also ends up running her own business, which is pretty cool. Like Cinderella III, for being essentially pretty unnecessary and maybe a couple of decades too late, Enchanted is still very enjoyable. Join me next time for a Pixar extravaganza with Colette from Ratatouille and Eve from WALL-E.
Something